Russia's air defense leans on a few flying quarterback jets. Russia's A-50U airborne early warning aircraft function as flying quarterbacks for its air defense network, and Moscow has no near-term way to replace the ones it has lost, defense researcher Michael Bohnert wrote in a recent analysis of the fleet. Bohnert said the aircraft's value comes down to line of sight and the curvature of the Earth. A ground-based radar can typically see a low-flying object only 10 to 20 miles away before the horizon blocks it, he said, while an airborne radar can potentially detect the same target from more than 200 miles out. This has two major implications, Bohnert wrote. The first is it provides much earlier warning, up to an hour for a strike drone and 10 to 30 minutes for a cruise missile. The second is it covers a much larger area, easily replacing a dozen or more surface radars. Because a single A-50 can substitute for numerous ground radars, Bohnert said Russia can leave many of those systems switched off until they are needed to target an incoming missile. A radar that is turned off, he noted, is much harder to locate because it emits no signal for enemy sensors to detect. He added that the same line-of-sight advantage extends to communications, since A-50U crews are trained to control both air and ground assets and can see and talk to nearly everything within range. On why Russia cannot quickly rebuild the fleet, Bohnert said the last A-50 airframe was produced around 1992, and that despite periodic upgrades, the type has been out of production for decades. The base IL-76 airframe is still manufactured today, he said, but the radar system requires specialized structural reinforcements that are far harder to produce. Russia's intended successor, the A-100, has still not entered serial production after more than a decade of development, according to Bohnert, who said the aircraft's radar is expensive to build and depends on numerous specialized parts. In 2025, Ukraine struck a facility involved in A-100 production using FP-1 drones, destroying a test aircraft and damaging the factory. Bohnert said work on the program has likely been on hold since, and that new aircraft are unlikely to arrive for several years. Bohnert estimated Russia currently has around half a dozen operational A-50U aircraft, used mainly to protect Russian President Vladimir Putin and only occasionally to help Russian forces fend off increasingly frequent Ukrainian FP-1 drone and FP-5 Flamingo cruise missile attacks. He pointed to Ukraine's use of UK-supplied Storm Shadow missiles at near maximum range inside Russian territory as an indicator of how far back from the front line the A-50U fleet is being kept. Flight tracking data compiled separately by the open-source channel Cyberbarashno points to the same conclusion, a small, closely guarded fleet flown under increasing pressure. The channel analyzed more than 1,600 messages referencing the A-50U between June 4th and August 2nd and found the aircraft largely grounded for duty against Ukraine through June 22nd, aside from the return to service of a repaired airframe, tail number 47 red, and transit flights between Vorkuta and Olynya. Starting June 23rd, one aircraft began flying nearly every night over what the channel called Russia's Volga rear area, covering Ulyanovsk and Samara regions, a pattern Cyberbarashno said held for the rest of the period and totaled roughly 60 individual sorties. The channel said an A-50U played a decisive role in repelling a Ukrainian cruise missile strike on July 4th. Flights that had previously originated from Ivanova, described as the fleet's home base, and from Ulyanovsk largely stopped after that date, with operations dispersing to Bolshoy Savino near Perm, Orenburg II, and Chelyabinsk, which the channel attributed to an effort to protect a scarce asset once its effectiveness became clear. On July 7th, Russia had 4 A-50U aircraft airborne simultaneously, which Cyberbarashno said represented nearly the entire operational fleet and a readiness level it had not previously recorded. The channel also reported one aircraft flying continuous night duty for 5 straight days, including a shift from 2:45 to 4:45 a.m., during which Ukrainian FP-5 Flamingo missiles were in the air. Samara, one of the areas the missiles reached that night, fell within that aircraft's coverage zone at the time. Confirmed losses to date remain limited but are rising. The open-source monitoring project Oryx has visually confirmed the destruction of at least 2 A-50 aircraft and 1 Berev A-100LL flying laboratory, the testbed used to develop the A-100S radar, a figure Oryx's methodology treats as a floor rather than a full count, since it requires photographic or video evidence for each loss.